We live in interesting times. Today's stories. COVID-19 updates in Canada. Canada jobless rate surges to 7.8% due to pandemic. Olympic dreams are on hold for Japan volunteers and hosts. Virus-infected Australian cruise ship arrives at Montevideo port. Run for your money. Scottish jogger raises thousands for health workers. Medical staff at a U.S. hospital describes how COVID-19 changes the way they work. Bordeaux Opera performs a concert for hospital workers and patients. Lifting the virus lockdowns too quickly could spark a deadly resurgence. Wuhan virus lockdown is over, but lingering fears may slow recovery. And Sri Lanka Army puts on a concert for residents under lockdown. I'm Arnie Aquino with Eagle News, broadcasting from our Vancouver, Canada studio, bringing you stories from around the globe. We start with Eagle News correspondent Thomas I. Likeness with a report on the COVID-19 situation in Canada.
Tough new rules for travelers coming into Canada are in effect. With more than 26,000 cases of COVID-19 in the country, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wants to make sure the virus isn't hitching a ride on foreign arrivals. Trudeau says it isn't enough to tell people at the border to self-quarantine. He says now, when someone arrives at a port of entry, they must present a credible quarantine plan.
The order that goes in tonight is a strengthening of the Quarantine Act orders to give authorities the ability, upon evaluation of the person entering Canada's plan to self-quarantine. If it is inadequate, they will be required to quarantine in a hotel. Examples of things that could be inadequate, for example, if their plan is to go stay in a place where there are many elderly family members at risk of COVID-19, or whether they don't have a set destination if they've been outside of the country for many years. We now have the authority to require them to self-isolate for 2 weeks in a quarantine location like a hotel.
Trudeau advises anyone coming to Canada to make their quarantine arrangements in advance. The government is also helping farmers and food processors who employ migrant farm workers. About 60,000 temporary workers who come here every year to work on farms and in processing plants must self-quarantine for 14 days. To help offset the cost of this, since they can't work until after the quarantine, the government is giving employers money to supplement the salaries of the migrant workers and help pay for the quarantine accommodation. Here is the COVID-19 situation in Canada. We have reported more than 26,000 cases of the infection. There have been 823 deaths. Ontario, and especially Quebec, the two provinces most affected, account for 80% of the cases in Canada, and that virus is ravaging the seniors' population. It's hit dozens of nursing homes in both provinces. There's a report that one home in Ontario has 19 deaths, and 73 of the home's 101 residents have tested positive for COVID-19. It seems that these homes are having trouble hiring enough people. Our Chief Public Officer of Health, Dr. Teresa Tam, says half of the COVID-19 deaths in Canada are linked to long-term care facilities. In Edmonton, Canada, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Canada's unemployment rate shot up to 7.8% last month, its biggest monthly increase in more than 40 years, as the economy bled jobs because of the coronavirus pandemic, the government said.
L'emploi, ça a été réduit en 3 jours pendant tout le mois d'avril, mais pour beaucoup de monde, ça inquiète. Pour moi aussi, ça m'inquiète quand même beaucoup pour le futur, pour tout le monde aussi. On verra ce qui va se passer. Si ça continue comme ça, je ne vais pas payer mon loyer, je vais juste acheter la nourriture, c'est tout.
The 2.2 percentage point increase from February was the biggest monthly rise since 1976, Statistics Canada said.
J'étais perdu mon travail 13-14 mars. 14 mars précisément, c'est que le centre où est-ce que je travaillais a fermé. C'est un centre sportif communautaire. Puis je travaille dans le domaine de l'entraînement, conditionnement physique. Pour l'instant, ça va parce que le Fonds d'urgence du Canada, les prestations d'urgence du Canada permettent de couvrir les dépenses. Mais éventuellement, si ça se prolonge trop longtemps, c'est certain que ça va devenir une source d'inquiétude.
The Canadian economy shed more than 1 million jobs in March as companies furloughed workers, the agency continued. The figures reflect unprecedented government interventions related to COVID-19, including the closure of non-essential businesses, travel restrictions, and public health measures, directing Canadians to limit public interaction, Statistics Canada said. It also warned of a worsening impact in April data. Analysts from the CIBC Bank said that the data caught only a tiny hint of what's to come, as both the US and Canada will be well into double-digit unemployment rates by April. In the US, business shutdowns caused by the pandemic cost 6.6 million US workers to apply for unemployment benefits last week, the Labor Department said. That massive number of first-time claims for jobless benefits in the week ending April 4 came on top of the previous week's count of 6.9 million. In Canada, the most marked increase in unemployment was recorded in Quebec, plus 3.6 points to 8.1%, a province which accounts for half of the country's coronavirus cases. Employment fell more sharply among employees in the private sector, minus 6.7%, than among those in the public sector, minus 3.7%. The largest employment declines were registered in accommodation and food services, information, culture and recreation, and education. Among young people aged 15 to 24, the unemployment rate rose to 16.8%, an increase of 6.5 points. As of Thursday morning, the virus had killed 476 people in Canada, according to figures provided by provincial authorities.
Je travaille plus, mais comme je peux pas avoir le chèque du gouvernement. Je veux pas parler à mon propriétaire pour dire que je peux pas payer. Ça me met un peu, ça me rend gênée de dire ça, mais j'espère que ça va aller bien, j'espère.
Moi, j'ai perdu mon emploi avant la COVID. Mais avant la COVID, on avait plus de possibilités de faire valoir nos droits par rapport aux employeurs. Et là, avec le taux de chômage qui a augmenté avec le virus, j'ai comme peur que lors du retour au travail ou enfin de retrouver un emploi, ça va être aux conditions de l'employeur et non plus aux conditions de l'employeur.
In the town of Sagamihara, near Tokyo, local officials had spent more than 2 years preparing to host athletes from Brazil and Canada. Even before the postponement, they were left reeling when Canada announced it would no longer send athletes to any games held this year because of the virus.
本当はね、今年来ていただける予定だったんですけども、来ないと。カナダがトップで不参加を申し込んでたんですごい結構残念で、地元の人も結構残念がってました。
やはり来てほしかったんでね、残念で、個人的にもいいからまたここに足を運んでもらえればいいなと、そういう思いでいっぱいです。ぜひ来年もしオリンピックでね来られたら来ていただきたいなと。
The Canadian decision was part of a wave of pressure that forced the eventual postponement of the Games, now scheduled to open a year later on July 23, 2021. But Sagamihara officials say they breathed a sigh of relief when both Canada and Brazil confirmed they would stick with the town next year. Residents have already rolled out the red carpet for Canadian athletes, including the national youth rowing team, which was greeted by hundreds of cheering locals when they visited for championships last year. Some locals offered athletes traditional meals and even traveled to Tokyo to cheer them on during competition, including Yoshimi Koike.
単純にその事前キャンプをただ受け入れるだけではなくて、その2カ国のことをですね、市民の皆さんにもよく知っていただいて、これからもその交流を続けていこうという趣旨で、ホストタウンになっているわけでございます。
He and his wife Kazuyo also hosted athletes for a meal of nagashi somen, noodles floated down open bamboo flumes filled with water to waiting diners to catch them with chopsticks.
カナダの方が来てくださったおかげで、私たち夫婦は外国の方をお迎えするっていうことがとても嬉しい、楽しいっていう思いになったので、これからもぜひね、交流ができたらと思っています。
Miyano said the town was relieved to know the athletes would still be coming next year instead.
カナダの強化コーチが、から連絡が来て、また来年もお願いしたいというふうな、連絡が来ましたので、非常に喜ばしいことだと嬉しくは思いました。ですからまた、昨年以上のおもてなしをしたいなと。
An Australian cruise ship stranded off the coast of Uruguay for 2 weeks with more than 100 people aboard infected with the new coronavirus arrived at the port of Montevideo. Around 110 Australians and New Zealanders are due to be evacuated from the Greg Mortimer and taken along a sanitary corridor to Montevideo's International Airport, where they will take a medically equipped charter flight to Melbourne in Australia. A Scottish filmmaker has raised more than €200,000 for Britain's frontline healthcare staff through a running campaign inspired by strict coronavirus lockdown rules. What started as a local initiative to raise funds for the state-run National Health Service quickly ballooned to include runners around the world and huge sums of money. It started as family and friends participating, but that snowballed into thousands of runners worldwide participating, said Olivia Strong, 27, a documentary producer in Edinburgh.
The fundraising campaign we've just set up is to run 5 kilometres, donate £5, and then nominate 5 people on your social media to do the same.
Strong was sparked into action while on her regular jog near her home and noticing how many others were also out exercising. An hour's exercise is one of only 4 permissible reasons to leave home under British lockdown rules, and Strong saw it as an opportunity to help the country stretch doctors and nurses battling the coronavirus outbreak. She asked participants to run 5 kilometers, raise £5, and nominate 5 others to do the same for her Run for Heroes campaign. Never in her wildest dreams did she imagine the level it would reach. In just a few days, the campaign has raised more than £180,000 or $225,000 or €205,000 and running.
The campaign has been received amazingly, beyond my wildest dreams. We've had participants and runners from all across the globe, from Sydney to the Cayman Islands to Hong Kong to Toronto, which is absolutely amazing. Altogether, there's been now over 30,000 runners.
Despite being just a little more than a week old, around 30,000 participants from as far afield as Sydney, the Cayman Islands, Hong Kong, and Toronto have already contributed.
Because now we've raised £180,000, and this is continuing with our target being £250,000. So hopefully that goes a long way to helping the NHS workers and make their life a little bit easier.
The money raised will be given to NHS Charities Together, a national appeal to protect the welfare of staff by providing food packages, accommodation, transport, and protective equipment. Still to come, medical staff at a U.S. hospital describe how COVID-19 changes the way they work. Bordeaux Opera performs concerts for hospital workers and patients. Lifting the virus lockdowns too quickly could spark a deadly resurgence. The Wuhan virus lockdown is over, but lingering fears may slow recovery. And Sri Lanka Army puts on a concert for residents under lockdown. This is Eagle News. You're watching Eagle News. I'm Arnie Aquino. Medical staff at a Spalding hospital near Boston talk about how they had to adapt after they opened a COVID-19 unit in their facility.
And we were asked about a month ago to open up 60 beds for potential COVID positive patients. We typically manage very high acuity patients, including patients on ventilators, patients who have had devastating, complex medical issues, but we've never dealt with COVID like anybody else. Pretty prepared for the surge if it comes, but even after the surge, what our expectation is even months down the road, because we take care of patients on ventilators and wean them off, that here at Cambridge, we're going to be seeing these COVID patients for many months who are going to need continued medical treatment even after the surge is over. So for us, this isn't just a story about a couple of months. This is probably going to be a story we're going to be living maybe 6 or 8 months out, taking care of these very sick patients once they survive COVID in their ventilator care.
Training to taking on and off the PPEs, everyone getting tested for the appropriate size mask. They've even opened up areas for us to shower and change before we go home. All things that they're adding extra that we never had before. So personally, I live with my wife who has asthma, so I have not been staying at home with her. In the beginning, I was sleeping on an air mattress in my parents' living room, and then the hospital started offering hotel rooms for medical staff that's working with the COVID patients. So I was able to stay in a hotel room in the city for a couple nights, but unfortunately, I was not able to do it for the whole time we're caring for these patients. So now I'm back at my parents' house in the air mattress.
Healthcare workers and patients at the Saint Andre Hospital in the French city of Bordeaux take in a special performance by members of the city's opera and ballet company. Musicians, singers, and the ballerina put on a garden concert that includes Johann Sebastian Bach's Cantata No. 82 and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's Serenade No. 13.
Nous retrouver dans ce contexte sans pouvoir faire quelque chose était très lourd pour nous. Donc aujourd'hui, si on peut amener un peu d'évasion, de bien-être, de méditation, de sérénité pour les patients, pour les soignants, on en est ravis. Et ceci en faisant très attention aux gestes barrières, port de masque pour certains.
Déjà, le cadre est absolument magnifique. C'est un lieu qu'on n'a pas la chance de connaître sans y venir. Et nous étions ravis vraiment de jouer pour le personnel soignant parce qu'eux sont là, on ne leur laisse pas le choix. Et donc nous avons la possibilité d'amener la musique ici. Donc c'est avec grand plaisir que nous l'avons fait. Toutes les normes de sécurité ont été respectées. Donc nous sommes très heureux d'avoir fait.
Comme les applaudissements le soir, les dons au personnel, ce genre de petites choses, évidemment que ça fait toujours du bien à tout l'univers des gens qui actuellement sont sous pression dans les hôpitaux.
Les personnels soignants, vous le voyez, ils sont aux fenêtres, ils sont très contents de voir ce beau concert dans ce merveilleux jardin de l'hôpital Saint-André. On a beaucoup de chance de recevoir tous les musiciens, tous les personnels sont très contents et puis la musique sera diffusée non seulement sur nos réseaux sociaux mais également dans toutes les chambres de l'hôpital.
The World Health Organization warned that a hasty lifting of restrictions imposed to control the COVID-19 pandemic could lead to a fatal resurgence of the new coronavirus. WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said it was working with countries on ways in which lockdowns could be gradually eased, but said doing so too quickly could be dangerous.
WHO wants to see restrictions lifted as much as anyone. At the same time, lifting restrictions too quickly could lead to a deadly resurgence. The way down can be as dangerous as the way up if not managed properly. WHO is working with affected countries on strategies for gradually and safely easing restrictions.
The global death toll is rapidly approaching 100,000. More than 1.6 million infections have been recorded globally, according to an AFP tally, since the virus first emerged in China in December. Tedros welcomed signs that the spread of the virus was slowing in some of the hardest-hit countries in Europe, namely Spain, Italy, Germany, and France. But he also warned of an alarming acceleration of the virus in some countries, highlighting Africa, where he said the virus was beginning to spread to rural areas. Tedros also sent his best wishes to British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who has been moved out of intensive care as he battles the coronavirus.
We are particularly concerned by the large number of infections reported among health workers. In some countries, there are reports of up to 10% of health workers being infected. This is an alarming trend. When health workers are at risk, we are all at risk.
as we're dealing with the ongoing situation in Congo. At one point during the outbreak of Ebola in Beni, at one of the most intense periods in the outbreak, nearly 70% of the cases were actually being transmitted within the healthcare system. So it shouldn't be a surprise to us with MERS, with SARS, with Ebola, that the healthcare environment is an environment in which people can be saved and treated, but it is also an environment in which viruses and other things are present, and we need to protect patients and we need to protect those health workers.
Hairstylist Ah Ping is back in business now that Wuhan's coronavirus lockdown has been lifted, but his salon has no customers, only empty chairs and lingering fears over a contagion that continues to haunt the city. Wuhan is waking from its coronavirus nightmare, loosening tight restrictions on movement and on businesses as it tries to move on. But full recovery remains hampered by fears of a potential new wave of infections. Many businesses and all schools are still closed, restaurants aren't allowed dine-in customers, and some neighborhoods remain sealed off behind barriers. Residents need to show they have a healthy rating on a mandatory phone app to leave their homes, use public transportation, or enter most public spaces. The 43-year-old, who declined to give his full name, also worries about getting his life restarted. He paid his salon's quarterly rent of 15,000 yuan, or $2,100 in full just before Wuhan was locked down on January 23rd. Now another rental payment is due. While many other Chinese cities are getting back to near normal, Wuhan's government has made clear that easing controls poses new perils and that a return to usual life will have to wait. In some areas, it's been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Wuhan authorities said 70 residential neighborhoods out of the nearly 7,000 recently declared epidemic-free lost that status this week, prolonging lockdown measures there. The government has suggested that status revocation was due to the discovery of asymptomatic cases. China initially withheld numbers of asymptomatic cases, people who test positive but show no symptoms of COVID-19, the pneumonia-like illness caused by the virus. It said on Thursday that the country now has over 1,000 such patients under medical observation, with 674 of those in Hubei, where Wuhan is the provincial capital. Chinese officials have said the virus emerged from wildlife sold for food at a local wet market. Many Wuhan residents expressed to journalists a continued fear about resuming normal activities. A 59-year-old shopkeeper who gave only her surname, Zhao, has reopened her little store but says people are too scared to come out and shop. Dancing outside the shop to get the blood flowing, Zhao said she also fears moving around the city, rarely going out and only for essentials while wearing protective clothing, masks, and gloves. Traffic has picked up after a ban on leaving the city was lifted on Wednesday, but vast numbers of businesses remain closed and plastic barriers in streets hamper movement. Daily new infections in Wuhan are now down to 0 on most days, but suspicions linger over the data publicized by the secretive ruling Communist Party that stands accused of a slow response to the outbreak, cover-up attempts, and moves to silence domestic critics. Many residents are still unable to leave their homes due to the mobile phone health code system, which tracks if where they live or have visited remain high risk. This hinders movement back to prosperous coastal regions where many Wuhan citizens work, a major income source for their families. The welcome in those industrial zones is fraying. Wuhan travelers face mandatory 14-day quarantines upon returning to some areas, and web users in places such as Shanghai have expressed fear and outrage at the prospect of people returning from Wuhan. A delayed recovery will add to the suffering of people like Hao Mei. When the lockdown came, the 39-year-old was in Wuhan working odd jobs, so was forced to leave her son and daughter, aged 14 and 10, at home in Enshi, around 550 kilometers away. Trumpets and Soldiers are Sri Lankan soldiers' latest addition to their kit. They belt out Sinhalese pop tunes for Colombo residents that have to stay at home due to the lockdown to fight COVID-19.
ලොකු සැනසීමක් අපි මානසිකව වැටලා හිටපු වෙලාවෙ මේ වගේ සංගීතයක් අද ඇවිල්ලා අපි පොඩ්ඩක් මේ අපි ගෙයින් චුට්ටක් එළියට බහලා අද මේක බලන් ඉන්න එක අපිට ඇත්තටම ලොකු සතුටක් අපි
That is this week's Eagle News. Join us next week for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on Facebook at facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I'm Arnie Aquino. We live in interesting times.